Hi, good day everyone. Yeah, welcome to our YouTube channel, The Divergent. Let's go. Don't laugh, my boy. Just kidding. Today we're gonna do some podcast. Yeah, you hear me? The title of podcast, a deeper explanation and understanding of Earth science. Do you familiar about Earth science?
Yes,
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 yes.
I am.
Can you give me some example about Earth science? Angelo.
About Earth science,
Yes, yes.
the three layers of the Earth, the inner core, four layers actually.
Yes.
The inner core, the outer core, the crust, and the other one. What the hell is that? I don't know. What is the other one?
Trust. Yeah.
Mantle.
Mantle. Yes, mantle. Yes. That's how we do it today. Yeah. By the way, my name is Alexander Sherwin Perez, the leader of the group. Introduce yourself, my boy.
My name is Jun Vicabe.
My name is Angelo Magaris.
My name is Maravitina Leia. My name is Maxine Anaklali.
Yeah. And we are the group 5 green output, but we're not gonna stall your attention any further. We're gonna proceed for the first question. We're gonna move on from question number 1. So, question number 1. How can rock forming minerals be identified using their chemical and physical properties? Maxine, can you explain this?
Before I answer that question, let's determine what rock forming minerals is. It is the building blocks of rocks. The composition and characteristic of these minerals determine the type of rock that form, such as in igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic rocks. Rock forming minerals can be identified by their chemical properties and physical properties. The chemical properties are chemical formula and crystal structure, while the physical properties are color, luster, hardness, strict, crystal form, gravity, cleavage, and fracture.
And we're back again. But we will proceed to question number 2. How are sedimentary rocks formed? This question will explain to you by Maxine again. So listen carefully and go Max.
Sedimentary rocks are formed through a series of processes that involves the accumulation, compaction, and cementation of sediments. These sediments can originate from pre-existing rocks or biological materials and are deposited in various environments such as rivers, lakes, oceans, and deserts. The formation of sedimentary rocks is a multi-step process broken down into several key stages: weathering, erosion, transportation, deposition, compaction, and vitrification.
Maxine, can you give me like at least three examples of sedimentary rocks?
Um, the three examples of sedimentary rocks are sandstone, shoal, and limestone. We can have a question for you. How are igneous rocks formed?
Igneous rocks form from the solidification of molten rock material. This process begins with magma, which is molten rock beneath the Earth's surface. When magma rises to the surface or comes into contact with cooler parts of the Earth's crust, it cools and solidifies. The rate at which cooling occurs determines the type of igneous rock formed.
What are the two types of igneous rock form?
There are two types, which is intrusive or plutonic igneous rocks. Plutonic or intrusive, this form from magma that cools slowly below the Earth's surface. Because they cool slowly, they allow large crystals to form. Granite is a common example of an intrusive igneous rocks.
Okay.
The second one is extrusive or volcanic igneous rocks. This form from lava that cools quickly on the Earth's surface. The rapid cooling results is in smaller crystals or even a glassy texture. Basalt is a common example of a extrusive igneous rock.
Another question for you. How are metamorphic rocks formed?
Metamorphic rocks started out as some other type of rock, but have been substantially changed from their original igneous, sedimentary, or earlier metamorphic form. Metamorphic rocks form when rocks are subjected to high heat, high pressure, hot mineral-rich fluids, or more commonly, some combination of these factors. Conditions like these are found deep within the earth or where tectonic plates meet. Process of metamorphism. The process of metamorphism does not melt the rocks, but instead transform them into denser, more compact rocks. New minerals are created either by rearrangement of minerals components or by reactions with fluids that enters the rocks. Pressure or temperatures can even change previously metamorphosed rocks into new types. Metamorphic rocks are often squished, smeared out, and fall. Despite these uncomfortable conditions, metamorphic rocks do not get hot enough to melt or they would become igneous rocks. I have a question for you. How do rocks behave under different types of stress?
Many forces acting on rock are called stress. Some of the forces acting on the crust are gravity, including the gravitational attraction by the sun and moon, forces caused by earth rotation. It causes a material to change shape, deformation, or strain. It depends on the type of rock, the surrounding temperature, and pressure condition. A rock is under uniform stress when the stress is all direction is equal, and when rock is stressed, it goes through a series of changes. Just like me and other people, rock also experience stress. This type of stress is tension, compression, and shear. The first one of stress is tension. Tension is a stress which occurs when rock falls apart or get longer. And the second stress is compression. Compression is a stress which causes rock to squeeze or push other rock. And the last stress is shear. Shear is a stress when occurs when the tectonic plate move past each other causing a rock or twice or change shape.
Hey boss, what's that?
Boss! Yung tama ka? Abaka is so useful. Abaka is mainly used for parol, donate, gown, and many more.
I have another question for you, Bettina. What are the lines of evidence of continental drift theory?
Before you answer that, I have a follow-up question. What is continental drift theory?
Continental drift theory is a large-scale horizontal movement of continents related to one another and to the ocean basins during one or more episodes of geologic time. Here are some evidence according to Alfred Wegener. He collected diverse pieces of evidence to support his theory, including geological fluid and fossil evidence. He noticed the coast of Western Africa and Eastern South America looked like puzzle and fit together and then drifted apart. And according to Wegener again, Earth had one giant supercontinental called Pangaea. Where did it come from? Pangaea comes from the ancient Greek word pan, meaning earth, and Gaia meaning earth. According to my research, Pangaea is not the only supercontinent believed to have existed. And here are some another important piece of evidence in the continental drift theory is the fossil relevance where fossil include Mesosaurus, meaning middle lizard, is an extinct genus of reptile from the early Permian of southern Africa and South America. Cygnognathus is an extinct genus of large pointed pterosaurs that live in the middle Triassic.
Triassic. By the way, that pronounced as genus. Yes, genus. Lystrosaurus.
Lystrosaurus is an extinct genus
Genus.
of herbivorous Dicinodon pteropside from the late Permian and early Triassic epochs
Epochs.
around 250 million years ago. Glossopteris and the largest and best known
Genus.
sorry, of the
Continue.
extinct Permian order of seed plant known as Glossopteridae.
Glossopteridates.
Silo, I have a question for you. What are the different results of the movement of plates?
Okay, so since movement of plates is directly related to the boundaries, I'll first recite them, if you're okay with that.
Yes, we're
So the first one is called divergent, the second one is called convergent, and the third one is called transform. So what is the result when a divergent plate boundary occurs? Divergent plate boundaries within two continental plates initially produce rifts, which eventually become rift valleys. But if it happens within two oceanic plates, it will form a raised ridge called a mid-ocean ridge.
So that divergent plate can cause tsunami.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Continue.
Okay, now what about the convergent plate boundaries? One plate, what happens in this type of boundary is where one plate slides beneath the other. This process is also known as subduction. Convergent plate boundaries also form mountain ranges.
So like landslide.
Yes.
Landslide. Okay. Okay. Gets.
So transform plate boundaries. At a transform plate boundary, tectonic plates slide past each other in opposite directions, causing earthquakes, displacing rocks, and creating ridges and valleys along each side of the strike-slip fault. One of the primary examples of a transform boundary is called the San Andreas Fault. It is a boundary between the North American plate and the Pacific plate, which created a major earthquake in 1906 when it moved nearly 300 miles.
Angelo, I have a question for you.
Okay, what is it this time?
What is the age of stratified rock identified?
There are two main ways on how to identify the age of a stratified rock. The first one is called relative dating. In this type of identifying, we determine which things are older or younger based on their relationships. And the second one is called absolute dating. In absolute dating, we measure the physical properties of an object itself and use these measurements to calculate its age. And there are three methods that we can use when using relative dating. The first one is called superposition. In a sequence of undisturbed sedimentary rocks, the oldest layers are at the bottom and the youngest layers are at the top. By studying the order of rock layers, geologists can establish a relative age sequence. The second one is called fossil correlation. Certain fossils, known as index fossils, are used to identify and correlate the age of rock layers. Index fossils are remains of species that existed for a relatively short geological time but were widespread geographically. By identifying these fossils in different rock layers, geologists can correlate and date the layers relative to one another. Last but not the least, cross-cutting relationships. If a rock layer or fault cuts through other layers, it is younger than the other layers it disrupts. For absolute dating, we only have two methods that we can use to identify the age of the stratified rock. The first one is called radiometric dating. This technique measures the decay of radioactive isotopes within minerals in the rocks. The second one is called varb analysis. In glacial lakes, annual layers of sediment, or varbs, if you want to call it that, can be counted to determine the number of years of deposition, which can provide age for sedimentary layers. Okay, for the final question, I want you, the leader of the group, the man himself, Alexander Sherwin Perez, to answer my question.
I'm the one who's gonna be answer the last
Are you ready
question.
to
Yes, yes, I'm
read
ready.
the
I'm ready.
question?
Yes, I'm ready.
So how
Bring it on!
so how are index fossils used to define and identify subdivision of the geological timescale?
So by identifying index fossils in rock strata, geologists can determine the relative age of the layers. Um, And since index fossils are found globally but only within specific geologic timeframes, they help geologists correlate strata from different parts of the world. Index fossils are used as key tools in defining and identifying subdivisions of the geologic timescale. These are fossils of organisms that were widespread geographically but existed for a relatively short specific period. They help geologists correlate rock layers across different regions and pinpoint the relative age of those layers. Let me discuss a few ways of how index fossils are used.
Okay.
Some index fossils are also used to define characteristic of certain geologic time periods. That they are used to define these periods. For example, the trilobites are index fossils for the Paleozoic era, while ammonites are used to define parts of the Mesozoic era. In essence, index fossils act as time markers, helping geologists subdivide Earth's history into manageable and well-defined sections.
Okay, so sorry if I told you like 5 minutes ago that that's gonna be the last question, but I have another question for you to answer.
Oh, you have many so question, ha?
Yeah. So, how can Earth's history be interpreted from the geologic time scale?
Um, again, come again.
How can Earth's history be interpreted from the geologic time scale?
Okay. In order to interpret Earth's history, they apply these 7 methods. Okay, 7 methods.
Seven deadly sins.
Oh, you watch the 7 deadly sin, ha?
Sure.
Escanor, I like that. Method number 1: understanding major events and transitions such as mass extinction. You know, the mass extinction of dinosaurs or any living things that not existed anymore. Okay. Method number 2: tracking biological evolution by fossils record and index fossil. The index fossil of the living things again. They are all about living things that they are not existed anymore. Method number 3: reconstructing past environments by sedimentary records and paleoclimatology. You know that the how weather's changing in climate change because the earth is full of polluted you know what I mean. Oh. Method number 4: geological process. I'm sorry. Yes, man. Method number 4: plate tectonics and continental drift with plate movements. Like Angelo discussed earlier, the boundaries, yes, the plates boundaries. And method number 5: geological processes in rock formation and erosion. Just like Junvik discussed earlier, the
Yes.
Maxine discussed earlier the sedimentary rocks like that. And method number 6: regiometric dating. Yeah, I don't know how that.
The one that I discussed earlier, yeah?
Oh, okay. I'm not listening to you, ah.
Why that?
Okay, lastly, method number 7, integrating multiple lines of evidence, yeah. The one who are in museums like that. They are preserving evidence to collecting data past era. Yeah.
Okay.
That's for today, guys. Once again, I'm Alexander Sherwin Perez.
And I'm Junvic Abe.
I'm Angelo Magaris.
I'm Maria Piscina Leia.
I'm Maxine.
And we are the Divergent. See you on another video. Bye-bye.